Some battles are too brutal, too horrifying, and too devastating to be remembered easily. Yet, these forgotten clashes shaped the fate of entire civilizations, leaving behind fields soaked in blood and kingdoms brought to their knees. What happens when an entire army is wiped out in a single day? When tens of thousands are drowned, butchered, or buried alive? These are not just battles, they are massacres that history tried to erase. Battle of Changping 260 BC, Qin buries 450,000 prisoners alive. The Battle of Changping was a turning point in ancient China's bloodiest era, a brutal showdown between the rising Qin state and its strongest rival, Zhao. What should have been a hard-fought contest turned into a catastrophe due to a single miscalculation, an untested leader thrown into the most decisive battle of the Warring States period. Zhao Kuo, son of a respected general, replaced the cautious Lian Po and led his army straight into a trap. Qin's ruthless commander, Bai Qi, used deception and psychological warfare, feeding Zhao false victories while cutting off their supplies. As Zhao's forces advanced, Qin's armies surrounded them, forcing a prolonged siege. Starved and hopeless after 46 days, Zhao's 450,000 troops surrendered. But Bai Qi showed no mercy. Instead of ransoming or absorbing them, he ordered a mass execution near Gaoping, Shaanxi. Sima Qian Shiji describes how the prisoners were buried alive in mass graves, ensuring Zhao's utter destruction. This massacre wiped out a generation of Zhao's fighting men, marking one of the most horrifying slaughters of the ancient world, an event history nearly erased but one that changed the fate of China forever. Battle of Arasio 105 BC. Rome suffers 120,000 deaths in one day. The Battle of Arasio stands as one of the darkest days in Roman military history, not only for its staggering loss of life but for the sheer incompetence that led to it. Rome faced a massive invasion from the Cimbri and Teutones, fierce northern warriors who had already ravaged several Roman provinces. Instead of uniting against the common threat, the two Roman commanders, Quintus Ceruleus Scipio and Gnaeus Mallius Maximus, let personal rivalry dictate their actions. Scipio, a patrician, refused to cooperate with Maximus, a consul from a lower-class background, dividing their forces and creating a fatal weakness. The Cimbri exploited this division, launching a devastating assault. Their warriors moved with speed and coordination, overwhelming the disorganized Roman forces. The once disciplined legions fell apart as panic spread through the ranks. What followed was not just a defeat, it was a slaughter. Along the Rhine River, near Arasio, tens of thousands of Romans were massacred as they attempted to flee. The Cimbri pursued without mercy, cutting down soldiers in the water, drowning them in armor, and trampling them underfoot. Plutarch's Life of Marius later described the devastation, highlighting how it exposed Rome's military flaws. In a single day, 120,000 Romans were butchered, their bodies left scattered along the riverbanks, a disaster that forced Rome to rethink its entire military system. Battle of Cannae 216 BC. Hannibal destroys 70,000 Romans. Among the most infamous defeats in Roman history, the Battle of Cannae was a masterclass in tactical genius and a nightmare for the Roman Republic. Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian general who had already humiliated Rome in previous battles, now set a trap unlike any the world had seen. With an army significantly outnumbered, he lured the massive Roman force, commanded by consuls Varro and Paulus, into a false sense of dominance. As they advanced in full force, Hannibal executed the double envelopment, a maneuver that sealed their fate. His troops gradually retreated inward, drawing the Romans deeper into a tightening ring. In a matter of hours, tens of thousands were trapped with no escape. The slaughter that followed was relentless. Polybius and Livy describe how the Romans, pressed together so tightly that they could barely swing their swords, were cut down en masse. Some suffocated in the crush of bodies, while others were picked off by Hannibal's disciplined infantry. The final massacre occurred near the Ophitis River in Apulia, Italy, where those who attempted to flee were either cut down or drowned in desperation. Livy's Abi Orb Candida notes that Hannibal's troops grew exhausted from the sheer scale of the killing, as 70,000 Romans were wiped out in a single day, leaving the Republic teetering on the edge of collapse. Battle of Salsu 612 and minus 300,000 invaders drowned. The Battle of Salsu was a masterclass in defensive warfare, where strategy, deception, and geography combined to inflict one of the deadliest ambushes in history. In 612 AD, the mighty Sui dynasty under Emperor Yang launched a massive invasion of Goguryeo, mobilizing a staggering 305,000 troops to crush the Korean kingdom. Yet, despite their overwhelming numbers, they met their match in Huljin Mundiok, the Goguryeo general who refused to engage in a direct confrontation. Instead, he employed a strategy of calculated retreats, luring the exhausted Sui army deep into hostile territory while cutting off their supply lines. The final blow came at the Salsu River. The Sui forces, desperate to cross, found themselves trapped when Goguryeo troops suddenly released a dam, unleashing a torrential flood. Tens of thousands were swept away in an instant, while survivors were swiftly cut down by waiting archers and cavalry. Samguk Sagi, Korea's historical chronicle, describes the carnage, noting that only a small fraction of the original Sui army escaped alive. The devastating loss weakened the Sui dynasty beyond repair, accelerating its collapse just a few years later. Nearly 300,000 men perished in a single campaign, marking one of the greatest military disasters of the ancient world. Battle of Yarmouk 636, a D 6-day carnage that destroyed Byzantium. The Battle of Yarmouk was one of the most catastrophic defeats in Byzantine history, a brutal 6-day engagement that sealed the fate of the empire's rule in the Levant. Determined to stop the advancing Rashidun forces, Emperor Heraclius sent a vast army under General Vahan, confident in their numerical superiority. However, they faced Khalid ibn al-Walid, a master tactician who turned the terrain and enemy weaknesses to his advantage. Instead of engaging in a frontal assault, Khalid used swift cavalry strikes and well-timed withdrawals, pulling the Byzantines into disorganized attacks. Their long supply lines and mixed contingents, Armenians, Greeks, and Arab auxiliaries struggled to coordinate under pressure. The battlefield itself became a weapon. The Yarmouk River's deep ravines acted as a deadly funnel, and as Byzantine formations collapsed, retreat turned to panic. Soldiers, cut off from escape, were herded toward the cliffs. The final massacre occurred near the Yarmouk Gorge, where thousands were either cut. Al-Baladhuri's Feudo al-Boldan paints a vivid picture of the chaos, showing how the slaughter changed the course of history. By the end, as many as 100,000 Byzantine troops lay dead, and the empire's hold over Syria was permanently shattered. Battle of the Teutoburg Forest 09 AD Rome's greatest defeat. The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest was one of the most catastrophic defeats in Roman history, a battle so devastating that it brought an abrupt halt to Rome's expansion into Germania. The Roman legions, led by Publius Quintilius Varus, were ambushed by a coalition of Germanic tribes under the leadership of Arminius, a Germanic officer who had once served as an ally of Rome. The battle unfolded in the dense forest of Teutoburg, where the Romans were lured into a deadly trap. Surrounded and caught off guard, the Roman soldiers fought valiantly but were overwhelmed by the sheer number of their enemies. In a matter of days, the Roman army was annihilated. 3 entire legions were wiped out, and their standards were lost, an unimaginable disgrace to the Roman Empire. Tacitus's Annals describes the chaos and desperation as Roman soldiers were slaughtered in the forest, with their bodies left to rot or be eaten by wolves. The destruction of the Roman legions at Teutoburg Forest marked the end of Roman expansion into Germania and forced the empire to reconsider its borders and military strategies. The memory of the battle haunted Roman commanders for centuries, with Teutoburg becoming a symbol of the high price of Roman ambition. The Battle of Stiklestad 1030 at Ed. The death of King Olaf II. The Battle of Stiklestad was one of the bloodiest and most significant clashes in Norwegian history, marking the death of King Olaf II, also known as Saint Olaf, a pivotal figure in the Christianization of Norway. After being exiled, Olaf returned to reclaim his throne and solidify Christianity in the Viking kingdom. However, his forces faced a powerful coalition of Norwegian chieftains who opposed his rule. The battle, fought on July 29, 1030, was brutal and relentless, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. Saint Olaf led his forces with fervor, but despite his leadership and determination, the battle turned against him. Olaf was struck down by a fatal blow, and his death marked the end of his reign and his dream of consolidating Christianity in Norway. His body was taken from the battlefield, and his martyrdom later contributed to his canonization as Saint Olaf, a revered figure in Norway's Christian heritage. The battle, while a loss for Olaf, became a defining moment in the history of the kingdom, symbolizing the clash between pagan traditions and the rising Christian faith. The Battle of Lepanto 1571, a decisive naval clash between Christians and Muslims. The Battle of Lepanto was one of the most significant naval battles in history, fought between the fleets of the Holy League, a coalition of Christian states, and the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean Sea. The Ottomans sought to expand their influence in Europe, while the Christian states, led by Spain and the Papal States, sought to defend their territories and halt the Ottoman advance. On October 7, 1571, the fleets met near the Gulf of Patras in Greece, and the battle turned into a bloody and decisive clash. Despite the Ottoman fleet's numerical superiority, the Holy League's forces, under the command of Don Juan of Austria, achieved a stunning victory. The battle saw over 25,000 casualties, with thousands of Ottomans killed or captured, and the Holy League losing around 7,500 men. The victory at Lepanto halted the Ottoman Empire's expansion into Europe and marked the beginning of a long decline for Ottoman naval power. The battle also became a symbol of Christian resistance to Islamic conquest and a pivotal moment in the centuries-long struggle for dominance in the Mediterranean. The Battle of Verdun 1916 AD battle. The Battle of Verdun is remembered as one of the most brutal and devastating battles of World War I, a conflict that defined the 20th century. Fought from February to December 1916, Verdun became a symbol of French resistance and determination, but it came at an enormous cost. The German army, under the command of Erich von Falkenhayn, aimed to bleed the French army dry and break their spirit by targeting the fortress city of Verdun. The French, under General Philippe Pétain, vowed to hold the line at all costs, knowing the symbolic and strategic importance of Verdun to France's national identity. The battle turned into a brutal war of attrition, with both sides suffering immense casualties. The French and Germans each lost nearly 400,000 men, and the battlefield became a wasteland of mud, barbed wire, and shattered trenches. The horrors of Verdun, marked by relentless artillery bombardments, gas attacks, and hand-to-hand combat, left a lasting scar on both the French and German armies. Verdun became a symbol of the futility of war, where the sheer number of lives lost in a single battle was overwhelming. The Battle of Verdun epitomized the horrors of World War I, a conflict that reshaped the world forever.